The silence of the Xylosian ruins was a physical thing, a pressure that built behind Kale's temples until his head throbbed. He ran a gloved hand over the cold, obsidian-like surface of a fallen monolith, his fingers tracing the alien glyphs that seemed to writhe in the low light. They weren't writing. They were screams. That was the problem with this place, with this entire dead world. Every rock, every shard of crystalline debris, whispered of a consciousness that had been extinguished not with a bang, but with a whimper. The air tasted of ozone and decay. Beside him, Anya knelt, her multi-tool humming as she excavated a data slate from the soil. Its surface was fractured, the inner circuits exposed. "Anything?" Kale asked, his voice a low rumble. She shook her head, her face grim. "Just corrupted. Like everything else. They didn't just die, Kale. They were unmade." A tremor ran through the ground, a deep, resonant groan that vibrated up from the planet's core. It wasn't tectonic. It was a sound of immense, ancient machinery stirring from a slumber that had lasted eons. Kale straightened, his hand falling to the pulse rifle slung over his shoulder. "We need to move. The resonance is getting stronger." They moved through the skeletal remains of a plaza, the shattered pillars pointing like accusing fingers at a bruised, starless sky. The Xylosians had been architects of the impossible, their cities grown from living crystal that pulsed with a soft, internal light. Now, that light was dying, replaced by the sickly green glow of their suit lamps. Ahead, the ground split open, revealing a chasm that descended into a darkness so absolute it seemed to drink the light. "This is it," Anya breathed, peering over the edge. The primary archive. Kale knelt, his boots crunching on broken glass. "Or their tomb." He tossed a rock into the void. It didn't clatter. It vanished, swallowed by the depth. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of dust, and something else, something metallic, like blood. A low hum began to emanate from below, a sound that vibrated in his bones and made his teeth ache. It wasn't a sound of technology. It was a sound of presence. "Whatever's down there, it's waking up," Anya said, her voice tight. Kale nodded, his eyes scanning the chasm's edge for a way down. He found it, a series of handholds carved into the rock, leading into the abyss. "We go down," he said. "We have to know what they knew." The descent was a slow, deliberate dance of faith and friction. Kale's gloved hands burned against the cold rock as he lowered himself, meter by meter, into the crushing dark. Anya followed, her breath a steady counterpoint to the humming from below. The air grew thick, smelling of ozone and something else, something ancient and hungry. The handholds ended abruptly at a ledge that overlooked a cavern of impossible scale. Below them, the floor was a sea of what looked like black glass, shimmering with faint, violet light. In the center of the cavern, a colossal structure pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat. It was a machine, but it was also alive, a heart of obsidian and light, throbbing with a power that made Kale's skin crawl. "By the stars," Anya whispered. The hum was louder here, a physical pressure that pressed against his eardrums. It was the sound of a billion voices crying out in unison. "It's a resonance chamber," Kale said, his voice barely audible. "They were using it for something. Something big." He pointed to a walkway that snaked across the glassy floor, leading to the machine's base. "Let's go." The walkway was treacherous, slick with condensation that hissed where their boots touched it. The closer they got to the machine, the more the hum intensified, until it felt like his entire skeleton was vibrating. The machine itself was a nightmare of geometry, a spire of interlocking crystal and metal that twisted into the cavern's ceiling. Light pulsed through its veins, a sickly violet that cast long, dancing shadows. And there, at its base, were the Xylosians. Or what was left of them. Their bodies were fused with the machine, their limbs stretched out like roots, their faces frozen in a silent scream. They weren't dead. They were part of it now, their consciousnesses trapped in a perpetual loop of agony. "Oh God!" Anya choked, her hand flying to her mouth. Kale felt bile rise in his throat. This wasn't just a ruin. It was a tomb. And a prison. "We have to shut it down," he said, his voice raw. "Whatever it's doing, it has to stop." He moved toward the central console, a platform of swirling light that hummed with lethal energy. As he reached for it, the light flared, and a voice, not a voice, but a thought, screamed into his mind. Asterisk pain. Endless pain. Asterisk he staggered back, clutching his head. It's alive, he gasped. It's aware of us. The thought voice returned, stronger this time. A wave of pure agony that crashed over Cale's mind. Asterisk, you cannot comprehend. You cannot stop. The cycle is eternal. Asterisk, he fell to his knees, his vision swimming. Anya was screaming, but he couldn't hear her. The noise was inside his skull, a shriek of a billion tormented souls. The machine pulsed faster, its violet light intensifying until it filled the cavern. The Xylosian corpses twitched, their fused bodies straining against the crystal that held them. It's feeding on them, Cale realized, the thought cutting through the noise. It's draining their life force to sustain itself. He forced himself to his feet, his hands trembling. The console was just ahead, a swirling vortex of light that promised either salvation or oblivion. We have to try, he yelled, though he wasn't sure if the words were for Anya or for himself. He lunged forward, his fingers closing around the edge of the console. The moment he touched it, the pain intensified, a white-hot spear of agony driving into his brain. He screamed, but no sound came out. The machine was fighting back. The console's lights surged, and the cavern erupted in a cacophony of sound. Not just the hum, but a chorus of screams, a symphony of agony that vibrated through the very rock. Cale felt his bones rattling, his teeth chattering. The Xylosian corpses were writhing now, their bodies convulsing as the machine drew more of their essence. Anya was on the ground, curled into a fetal position, her hands clamped over her ears. It's too much, she sobbed. It's going to kill us. Cale gritted his teeth, ignoring the blinding pain. He had to focus, had to find a way to sever the connection. His eyes darted across the console's surface, searching for a control, a switch, anything. The light was a whirlpool of violet and black, and in its depths, he saw something. A symbol, not a Xylosian glyph. Something else. A sigil of interlocking circles that seemed to pulse with a faint, golden light. It was a key, a way to unlock the machine's prison. He reached for it, his fingers trembling. The moment he brushed against the sigil, the screams stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. The silence was absolute, a vacuum that seemed to suck the sound from the air. Cale pulled his hand back from the console, his heart pounding. The sigil had vanished, replaced by a new symbol, a circle with a slash through it. A lock. The machine was dormant, its pulsing light now a steady, calm glow. The Xylosian corpses were still, their faces frozen in a final, peaceful expression. It's over, Anya whispered, crawling to his side. You did it. Cale nodded, but he didn't feel relief. He felt something else. A presence. Not in his mind, but in the cavern itself. A flicker of light at the edge of his vision. He turned, his hand tightening on his rifle. There, standing at the edge of the glassy floor, was a figure. It was made of pure light, a humanoid silhouette that shimmered and pulsed with an inner radiance. It had no face, no features, just a smooth, glowing head and a body that seemed to bend the light around it. It was the source of the resonance, the thing that had been feeding on the Xylosians, and it was staring at them. The being of light didn't move. It simply stood there, its form radiating a cold, silent fury. Cale raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger, but he knew it was useless. You couldn't shoot light. The being took a step forward, and the ground beneath its feet didn't crack or break. It simply bent, as if the laws of physics were suggestions it could ignore. The air grew colder, and the light from the dormant machine dimmed, as if the being was siphoning its energy. What are you? Anya asked, her voice trembling. The being didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, a limb of pure, condensed light, and pointed at Cale. A wave of pressure washed over him, not physical, but mental. It was curiosity, but a terrifying, alien kind. It was examining him, probing his mind, his memories, his very essence. Cale felt exposed, naked before this entity. It saw his fear, his grief, his anger. It saw everything. And then, it saw something else. It saw the sigil he had touched, the lock he had used to stop the machine. The being's light flared, and the pressure in Cale's mind intensified. It wasn't just curious anymore. It was fascinated. It had never encountered a mind like his. A mind that could conceptualize abstract symbols, that could see patterns in chaos, that could impose meaning onto the meaningless. The Xylosians had been like it, beings of pure energy, bound by logic and resonance. But humans were different. Humans were storytellers. They saw faces in the clouds, heard voices in the wind, attributed intent to the inanimate. They anthropomorphized everything. And that, the being realized, was a power it had never understood. The being lowered its hand, and the pressure receded. It took another step, its light dimming further. It was weakening, its connection to the machine severed. It needed a new source of energy, and it had found one. Kale saw the shift in its light, the way it focused on him, and a cold dread washed over him. He understood now. The Xylosians hadn't been prisoners. They had been sacrifices. The being fed on consciousness, on the raw emotional energy of sentient beings. And it had been hungry. The being's form shimmered, and it began to change. The humanoid shape dissolved, and the light coalesced into a vortex, a whirlpool of violet and gold that pulsed with a hungry rhythm. It was no longer just observing. It was preparing to strike. Kale raised his rifle, but he knew it was pointless. The being was faster than thought, a being of pure energy that could move between atoms in an instant. Anya scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with terror. "What do we do?" she yelled. Kale's mind raced. He couldn't fight it. He couldn't run. But he could think. He could use the one weapon the being didn't understand. He closed his eyes, focusing not on the threat, but on the sigil, the lock, the symbol of control. He poured all his will into it, all his belief in its power. He wasn't just remembering the sigil. He was creating it. He was giving it meaning, purpose, a reality the being couldn't comprehend. The vortex pulsed, and a tendril of light lashed out, striking the console. The machine's light flared, and the Xylosian corpses began to twitch again. The being was trying to reactivate it, to restart the cycle. Kale opened his eyes, his hands outstretched. He wasn't aiming a gun. He was offering a gift. The gift of a story. The gift of a lie.